A tiny, trembling puppy hides in a dark corner, crying, "Don't touch me." Abandoned, sick, and terrified, she has given up on the world until one person dares to reach out. What happens next will shatter your heart and rebuild it with hope, trust, and the unbreakable bond between a rescued puppy and the human who refuses to let her go. Before we move on, if you're an animal lover, tap subscribe. It's completely free, and every click inspires us to keep sharing the stories that truly touch the heart and give a voice to those who can't speak for themselves. The market was alive with its usual chaos, voices shouting prices, radios playing old songs that tangled with the cries of vendors selling citrus and spices. Children darted between stalls, their laughter trailing like echoes across the cracked pavement. To anyone else, it was just another ordinary day in Santa Ana. But in the farthest corner, where shadows pressed against peeling walls and the smell of dust clung heavier than perfume, something small and trembling tried to disappear. She was hardly more than a shadow herself. A bundle of bones wrapped in dull fur, crouched so low it looked as if the concrete might swallow her whole. Her ribs pushed against her skin with every breath, too sharp, too fragile, like the world had taken more than it had ever given. A pair of dark eyes peered out, wild and glassy, and from her throat came a sound that silenced even the nearest stall. A cry, not a bark, not a growl, just a thin, broken cry that said more than words ever could. "Don't touch me." The people passing by didn't stop. Some turned their heads, muttering about strays and sickness. Others glanced down once, their pity evaporating before it reached their hands. The puppy was too weak, too ragged. To them, she was already gone. But not to me. I don't know what pulled me toward her that day. Maybe it was the way her paw twitched every time someone's shadow moved across her. Maybe it was the desperate way her ribs lifted, as though each breath was both a victory and a surrender. Or maybe it was because I knew what it felt like to be overlooked, to sit in the corner while the world carried on, convinced no one would ever choose you. I knelt slowly, letting the chatter of the market fade. Her ears flattened, and her tiny body pressed harder against the wall. She was bracing for pain, the kind of pain she had clearly learned too young. My throat tightened. I wanted to reach for her, but I didn't. Not yet. "Hey," I whispered, my voice barely louder than her trembling whimpers. "It's okay. I see you." Her eyes flicked to mine, sharp with fear, and for a heartbeat I thought she might lunge or cry louder. But instead, she froze, as if the sound of words was something she couldn't quite remember. I lowered my hand, palm open, resting it flat on the ground where the sunlight cut across the corner. The concrete was hot, my arm ached, but I stayed still. Minutes stretched. The crowd moved around us, a blur of footsteps and voices, but here, in this corner, there was only her and me. Then, the smallest movement. Her nose twitched. Her ribs shuddered. And inch by inch, she leaned forward, nostrils flaring as she sniffed the air between us. My heart thudded painfully. I held my breath, afraid even the rise of my chest might shatter her fragile courage. She didn't touch me. Not yet. Instead, she let out another sound, a faint, pitiful whine that cracked like glass in the middle. The kind of sound that makes the word abandoned too small. I whispered again, softer this time. "You don't have to be afraid. I won't hurt you." The spell broke when a vendor nearby shouted a price. She jerked back into the shadows, ribs quaking, eyes wide with terror. My hand remained empty. I wanted to gather her up, to promise her safety, but I knew if I rushed, I'd lose her. So I sat there, as ridiculous as it must have looked, crouched in the dirt while the world spun its wheels. I stayed because leaving wasn't an option anymore. After what felt like hours, I saw it. The tiniest flick of her paw, sliding forward across the dust. Then another. Her body still shook, but something in her eyes shifted, curiosity flickering beneath the fear. She stopped just shy of my hand, staring at it like it held every answer she wasn't sure she could trust. Her breath hitched. She leaned forward. Her nose brushed my skin. It was barely a touch, lighter than air, but it felt like the heaviest gift I had ever been given. Tears stung my eyes. I didn't dare move, didn't dare close my fingers. I just let her decide. And in that fragile second, she did something that broke me completely. She sighed, not in pain, not in defeat, but in the faintest surrender of trust. That was the moment I named her. Selena. It meant moon, soft and steady, a light you can't always see but is always there. And as I whispered it, she blinked, her ears twitching as though the sound belonged to her. But trust is not a switch. The moment a man walked too close, her body shrank back, trembling so violently I thought she might break apart. She wasn't ready to be saved. Not yet. I swallowed the ache in my chest. It's okay, Selena, I murmured, my voice shaking. I'll wait as long as you need. And I meant it. Because sometimes, the corner of silence is not a place of ending. Sometimes, it is the beginning of everything. The next morning, I returned to the market before the crowds arrived. The vendors were only just setting up their stalls, dragging crates of fruit, buckets of fish, and bags of rice across the stone ground. The air was thick with damp earth and smoke from the first cooking fires. My eyes went straight to the corner. She was there. Selena hadn't moved far. She sat curled against the wall, her body half hidden in shadow, her ears pressed flat. A crushed piece of bread lay untouched beside her, likely thrown by someone who didn't want to get too close. She looked smaller than I remembered, as if the night had taken another piece of her. When she saw me, her body stiffened. The trembling began again, running from her shoulders to her legs. I crouched slowly, keeping the same distance as before. "Hi, Selena," I whispered. She blinked, her nose twitching. This time, I brought something with me, a small piece of chicken wrapped in paper. I placed it carefully on the ground between us, not pushing it toward her, just leaving it there. Then I pulled my hand back, resting it once more on the hot stone, palm open. She stared at the food for a long time. Hunger warred with fear, a battle I could see etched in every hesitant movement. Her ribs expanded sharply as she sniffed the air. Then, in a movement so quick it was almost invisible, she darted forward, grabbed the chicken, and retreated back to the wall. The sound of her chewing broke something inside me. It wasn't just eating, it was survival, desperation. "You're safe," I murmured. "Take your time." Her eyes flicked to mine between bites, wary, calculating. I didn't move, didn't try to reach. When she finished, she licked her lips, then curled into herself again, her tail tucked tight. I stayed until the market grew busy, until the voices swelled too loud and the space around us grew tight with feet and shadows. Only then did I stand, my knees aching. "I'll come back tomorrow," I promised softly. "I'm not going anywhere." The days that followed became a rhythm. I arrived early, bringing scraps of food, bits of chicken, small pieces of cooked fish, sometimes rice mixed with broth. At first, Selena wouldn't eat until I backed away. Then slowly, she began to take the food while I was still crouched. Each day, she came a little closer. Each day, her trembling lessened by the smallest fraction. On the fifth morning, something shifted. I placed a strip of chicken closer to my hand, my palm resting flat on the ground beside it. She hesitated for a long time, her body shaking, eyes darting to every sound around us. Then, driven by hunger and something deeper, she crept forward. Step by step. Her paws were silent on the stone, her breathing ragged. She reached the food, snatched it up, and froze. Her nose had brushed against my fingers. I didn't move. My chest ached with the effort of staying still, of not reaching out and ruining the fragile trust that was growing between us. She stood there, chewing slowly, her wide eyes locked on my face. Then, almost impossibly, she lowered herself into a crouch and sniffed my hand again. Her whiskers tickled my skin, her breath warm and uneven. Tears filled my eyes. "Good girl, Selena," I whispered, barely more than a breath. Her ears flicked at the sound, but she didn't retreat. She lingered a moment longer, then slipped back into the corner, curling tightly as if ashamed of her own bravery. But for me, it was everything. By the second week, the vendors had started to notice. "Why do you waste food on that mutt?" one man asked, shaking his head. "She's too far gone. Better to let her be." Another woman clicked her tongue. "Strays like that bite. Don't get yourself hurt." I listened, but their words slid off me. They didn't see what I saw. They didn't hear the faintest sigh that escaped Selena when she allowed herself to eat near me. They didn't notice the way her eyes softened, even for a second, when she realized I wasn't leaving. What they saw was a stray. What I saw was a soul clawing her way back from the dark. The first touch came on a morning heavy with mist. The air clung to my clothes, damp and cool, and the market smelled of wet earth. Selena was already waiting, her eyes fixed on the spot where I always crouched. This time, she didn't hesitate as long. She crept forward, her paws damp with dew, her ribs quivering. She took the food from beside my hand, then lingered. Her gaze darted to mine, sharp with fear, but also searching. "Selena," I whispered, my voice trembling. "It's okay." Slowly, cautiously, she stretched her neck forward. Her nose pressed into my palm. I didn't close my fingers. I didn't move at all. But her warmth, her fragile trust, burned through me like fire. And for the first time, she didn't run. She stayed. That night, I lay awake replaying it over and over. The way her paw had shifted closer. The way her nose had lingered against my skin. The way she hadn't cried this time. It wasn't rescue. Not yet. But it was the first step. And sometimes, the first step is the hardest. The one that means the rest might finally be possible. The weeks blurred into each other, stitched together by routine. Every morning I returned to the same corner, crouched low on the stone, offering food and patience. And every morning, Selena waited for me. She no longer cried when I approached. The trembling had softened, though it never truly left her. Fear was etched into her bones like scars, invisible but permanent. Still, she had begun to move differently, no longer frozen against the wall, but inching toward me, her paws cautious yet determined. I never rushed her. Even when my knees ached from crouching too long, even when vendors mocked me for wasting time on a lost cause, I stayed. Because Selena had given me the gift of trust once, and I would not betray it. One morning, I tried something new. Instead of placing the food between us, I held it in my hand. My palm was open, fingers steady, the meat resting across my skin. Selena froze when she saw it. Her ribs expanded sharply as she sucked in a nervous breath. Her ears flattened. She stared at the food, then at me, then back again. For long minutes, she didn't move at all. Then, slowly, hunger pulled her forward. Step by step, her paws shuffled across the dirt, her body trembling with every inch. She reached the food, her nose brushing my skin. Her teeth grazed my fingers as she snatched the meat. I didn't flinch. For the first time, she had taken something directly from my hand. And for the first time, she didn't run straight back to the corner. She stood there, her dark eyes locked on mine, chewing slowly, as though testing whether this moment could be real. My throat tightened. I whispered softly, "Good girl, Selena. You're so brave." Her ears twitched at the sound of her name. That evening, I stayed longer than usual, talking to her in a low, gentle voice. I told her about the weather, about the market, about nothing and everything. Words didn't matter, the tone did. And in the quiet, something incredible happened. Selena crept closer, close enough that her paw rested against my shoe. She stayed there, her small frame quivering, her nose twitching as she studied me. Then, after what felt like an eternity, she let out a faint sigh and curled into a crouch beside my foot. She wasn't touching me, not really. But she was close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from her fragile body. I didn't dare move. I sat there until the vendors packed their stalls and the sky burned orange with sunset. When I finally stood, Selena startled, retreating back to her corner. Her eyes followed me as I walked away. And for the first time, I felt her gaze not as fear, but as longing. Progress came slowly, but it came. She began to eat from my hand every day. She let her nose linger longer against my palm. And once, just once, she brushed her head against my fingers, almost like a touch, before retreating again. But the wall between us was still there. Any sudden sound, any man walking too close, and she would shrink back into her shadow, her trembling returning with violent force. The trust she gave me was fragile, like glass that could shatter with the smallest crack. And I knew I couldn't keep her in that corner forever. The turning point came one stormy afternoon. Dark clouds swallowed the sky, and the market emptied early as vendors packed away their goods. Rain began to fall, heavy and merciless, drumming against the tin roofs. I ran back to the corner, my clothes already soaked, my shoes splashing through puddles. Selena was there, huddled against the wall, her fur plastered wet against her thin frame. Her eyes were wide, panicked, her cries faint beneath the roar of rain. "Selena!" I shouted over the storm, crouching low. My hands shook. The water pooled around us, running cold and fast along the stones. She cried louder, pressing into the wall as if she could disappear. I dropped the food I carried. It was useless now, washed away in seconds. Instead, I held out my hands, empty, trembling. "It's okay, baby. Please, come to me." Lightning split the sky, and thunder cracked so loud the ground seemed to shake. Selena whimpered, her body shaking violently. I moved forward, just enough to close the distance. For the first time, I reached out. My hand brushed against her soaked fur. She flinched, but she didn't bite. Instead, she froze, her ribs heaving against my touch. My heart broke at how small she felt, how frail, how impossibly light under the weight of rain. "Shoo," I whispered, my voice raw. "You're safe. I promise you're safe." For one fragile second, she stayed. Her head pressed against my palm, her body trembling against my knees. And then, with a sound that was half whimper, half sigh, she leaned into me. The storm raged around us, but in that corner, a wall finally cracked. She had let me hold her. That night, when I carried her away from the market, her body shivering against my chest, I knew everything had changed. Selena had taken her first step out of the shadows. And now, it was my turn to show her there was a world beyond fear, a world that could finally belong to her. The first night in my home was a test, for both of us. Selena clung to me as I carried her, her body trembling beneath the towel I wrapped around her soaked fur. She smelled of rain and dust, of fear and survival. I set her down gently inside the small room I had prepared, a quiet space with blankets layered in a corner and a bowl of warm broth waiting. The moment her paws touched the floor, she bolted to the far wall, curling into herself the way she had in the market. My chest ached. Even here, in safety, her instinct was still to hide. I sat on the floor, not moving closer. "It's okay, Selena," I whispered. "This is yours. All of this is for you." She didn't respond. Only her eyes followed me, wide and untrusting. I stayed with her until my eyelids grew heavy. That night, I fell asleep on the floor, my head against the wall, listening to her faint whimpers in the dark. Morning light spilled through the window, warming the room. I woke to silence. Selena was still in her corner, but something had changed. Her eyes weren't as wide. Her trembling wasn't as violent. And the bowl of broth I'd left the night before empty. A fragile smile pulled at my lips. Step by step, over the next days, I built her world with patience. I left food and water within reach, speaking softly whenever I entered. I didn't force touch, though my hands itched to give her comfort. I let her watch me from her corner, let her see that I came and went without harm. At night, I still slept nearby, my body a silent promise that she wasn't alone anymore. The first breakthrough came on the fourth morning. I placed her meal a little closer to where I sat, my legs folded on the floor. She hesitated, her ribs rising and falling in uneven rhythm. But hunger pulled her forward. Paw by paw, she approached, stopping just short of my reach. Her nose dipped into the bowl, her body tense, ready to retreat at the slightest movement. I didn't move. I barely breathed. When she finished, she stayed a moment longer, staring at me with those dark, searching eyes. Her ears twitched at the sound of her name when I whispered it. For the first time, she didn't run back to the corner. She lay down where she was, her body still stiff but closer, undeniably closer. Tears stung my eyes. Progress came in fragments. A brush of her nose against my hand as she reached for food. A sigh that escaped when she settled near my feet. A whimper that wasn't fear, but something softer, something like longing. Each fragment felt like a victory. But healing isn't a straight line. Some nights, she woke trembling, her cries breaking through the silence. I would whisper gently, never touching her unless she came to me. Slowly, she began to. A paw against my wrist, her head against my knee. Small, halting gestures of trust. And with every gesture, my promise to her grew heavier. I would never let her go back to that corner of silence. The first time I opened the back door, the sunlight spilled in like gold. Selena froze, her body taut with fear at the sudden brightness. She whimpered, shrinking back. "It's okay," I murmured, crouching beside her. "That world out there, it's yours now, too." I stepped outside, sitting on the porch. I didn't call her. I simply waited. Minutes passed. The wind stirred, carrying the scent of grass and earth. Selena's nose twitched. She inched forward, paws hesitant on the threshold. Then, in one trembling step, she crossed it. Her paws touched the grass. Her head lifted. And for the first time, she wasn't hiding in shadow. She was bathed in light. I watched her explore the yard, cautious but curious. Her ribs still showed, her tail tucked low, but she was moving forward. Each step felt like a piece of her was returning. That night, something extraordinary happened. As I sat on the floor, reading softly to fill the silence, Selena crept closer. Her body brushed against my leg, tentative but real. My breath caught. Slowly, carefully, I lowered my hand. She didn't flinch. Her head pressed into my palm. My fingers trembled as they threaded through her fur, rough and uneven but warm. She leaned into the touch, her sighs soft and fragile, as if she'd been waiting her whole life for it. Tears spilled down my cheeks. "You're safe now, Selena," I whispered. "I promise. You'll never be hurt again." She didn't retreat. She stayed, curled against me, her eyes closing as sleep claimed her. For the first time, she chose closeness over distance. And in that moment, I knew Selena wasn't just surviving anymore. She was learning to belong. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the window, painting warm patterns on the floor. Selena stirred on her quilt, stretching her tiny legs as though testing the boundaries of her new world. Her coat, once dull and patchy, caught the light in soft gold streaks. She blinked slowly, a fragile trust lingering in her dark eyes. I knelt beside her, careful not to startle her, and whispered, "Good morning, Selena. Ready for a new day?" She tilted her head, ears twitching, before taking the first hesitant steps toward me. Each paw was deliberate, measured, a dance of courage and fear. I held my breath, letting her decide the pace. Breakfast was another small victory. I set the bowl on the floor, stepping back to give her space. She sniffed the edges, pawed at it, then dipped her nose into the warm food. When she lifted her head to look at me, there was no flinch, just curiosity and a faint, emerging spark of joy. My chest swelled with something I hadn't felt in years: pride. Weeks passed, and each day brought subtle changes. Selena's paws found rhythm on the hardwood. Her tail flicked with increasing confidence, and she began to greet me with soft whines, demanding attention instead of shrinking from it. The apartment, once quiet and empty, now resonated with tiny barks, the rattle of a chew toy, and the gentle thump of her tail against the floor. Neighbors noticed, too. Mr. Ramirez's shepherd mix became her quiet guardian, allowing her to tug at his ears and follow him around without protest. Children from upstairs would peek down the stairwell, giggling as Selena tried to catch their shoelaces, and sometimes left small treats at the door. Each gesture reinforced a truth I hadn't known I needed: we weren't alone. One afternoon, I decided it was time to take her beyond the apartment. I gathered a leash, soft and light, and knelt beside her. "We're going outside, Selena. You'll like it, I promised." She froze, ears back, tail low. Fear was a shadow she still carried, one I couldn't chase away with words alone. Slowly, I guided her to the door, letting her lead. Her tiny paws touched the sunlit pavement. She stopped, sniffed, and inched forward again. I walked beside her, silent, steady, allowing her to explore at her own pace. A neighbor smiled as we passed. "That's the puppy from the market," he said, and I nodded, voice caught in my throat. Selena paused, lifted her head, and barked, a real, unbroken bark that startled even me. It was sharp, proud, a proclamation of presence. The sound echoed down the street, drawing curious glances. People slowed, eyes widening as they recognized the tiny dog who had once hidden in fear. She wagged her tail, spun in a circle, and pranced toward me. The world, once a place of danger, was beginning to feel like home. Back inside, I watched her explore the apartment with new energy. She sniffed every corner, tested the softness of the rug, and claimed her favorite spot by the window. Her breathing was steady, her movements lighter. Her body still bore traces of the struggle she had endured, but her spirit had begun to reclaim itself. That evening, I caught her staring out the window at the neighborhood dogs playing. Her tail flicked in silent longing. I knelt beside her, brushing my hand along her spine. "One day, you'll join them," I whispered. "But for now, we take it slow." She leaned into my touch, sighing softly, the kind of sigh that speaks of trust found. Every night became a ritual of closeness. Selena would curl beside me on the floor, head resting on my arm, paws brushing my hand. The apartment, once silent and lonely, now held warmth, laughter, and life. And in those moments, I realized that the rescue had transformed more than her. It had transformed me. I no longer ate alone, no longer watched the hours pass through a screen. My life had a rhythm again, defined by small pause, quiet whines, and a fragile heartbeat pressed against mine. I had become part of her world just as she had become part of mine. One morning, as the sun poured through the blinds, Selena climbed onto my lap and pressed her head against my chest. I whispered, "You saved me, Selena." Not the other way around. Her eyes closed, ears twitching in faint acknowledgement, and I knew she understood. The bond between us was no longer fragile. It was unbreakable. Soon, I decided it was time to return to the market. I wanted her to see the place where it all began, not as a victim, but as a survivor. I carried her carefully, each step measured, until we reached the corner where I had first found her trembling. The market was alive with noise, scents, and movement. Vendors shouted prices, radios competed with laughter, and shoppers bustled through the aisles. Selena's paws touched the pavement, and her eyes widened, but this time in wonder, not fear. She circled, sniffed, and barked, a strong, confident bark that turned heads. A woman paused mid-sentence, recognizing the tiny puppy she had once ignored. "Is that the same dog?" she whispered. The man at the fruit stall leaned closer, eyes softening. I nodded, unable to speak. Selena pranced between stalls, tail high, chest out, every bark a declaration. She had returned. People began to clap, at first softly, then louder. The market seemed to celebrate her triumph. Selena froze, ears twitching, then wagged her tail and approached me. I scooped her up, tears spilling down my cheeks, laughing through them. She licked my chin, a reminder that our journey wasn't about fear. It was about hope, courage, and the bond we had built. The market, once a place of despair for her, had become the stage of her triumph. And in that moment, I understood that rescue wasn't just about survival. It was about restoring life, joy, and trust. Back home, the rhythm of life shifted completely. Selena no longer whimpered through the night. Instead, she claimed her spot on the quilt by the window, tail thumping whenever I moved. Sunlight pooled on the floor, and she chased its edges with clumsy leaps, her little paws skidding across the hardwood. The soft gold of her fur seemed almost magical in the light, a mark of survival and resilience. I watched her, heart swelling. Every small movement she made, pawing at a stray thread, shaking off her body like a tiny queen asserting herself, felt like a celebration of life. Neighbors stopped by, drawn to the transformation. Mr. Ramirez's old shepherd mix, once her silent protector, now let her tug at his ears, chase his tail, and even wrestle without protest. Children laughed as she darted between their legs, squeals of delight filling the hallway. Life had returned to a space that had once been empty and quiet, and it belonged, in part, to her. Her health improved steadily. Ointments healed the patches of raw skin, her ribs filled out slowly, and the thin tremor in her legs disappeared. But more than her body, her spirit bloomed. The fear that had once defined her every glance, every tremble, melted into curiosity and courage. She barked at the mailman, growled playfully at my slippers, and bounded through the apartment as though it were her kingdom. One evening, as the sun dipped below the rooftops, spilling orange and pink across Santa Ana, Selena climbed onto the couch beside me. She stretched out, pressed her body against mine, and sighed. A deep, contented sigh that seemed to say she had finally arrived. I held her, feeling her heartbeat steady, and whispered softly, "I thought I was saving you, but you saved me." Her ears twitched, her small body shifted closer, and I knew she understood. Days became weeks, and weeks turned into months. Every morning, I awoke to the gentle weight of her resting paws on my arm, her soft breath warm against my skin. Each bark, each playful nip, each quiet sigh as she curled in my lap reminded me of the fragile journey we had shared. I had once lived in a world of screens, silence, and isolation. Now, it was alive with presence, companionship, and laughter. I began walking her outside regularly. The street that had once been overwhelming to her became familiar. She sniffed every corner, greeted other dogs, and occasionally darted after a butterfly. Her first cautious steps on the pavement evolved into confident strides, tail high, chest forward. She had learned, slowly and carefully, that the world could be kind. And every step she took pulled me further from my own fears and solitude. Returning to the market became a ritual. Vendors who had once ignored her now smiled warmly. Shoppers recognized her, whispering, "That's the little puppy who hid in the corner." Selena would prance between them, tail wagging, chest out. Her barks echoed proudly, a proclamation of triumph over the fear that had once dominated her life. People clapped. She paused, ears twitching, then continued her proud march as though acknowledging their admiration. Her journey wasn't just about physical healing. It was about trust regained, hope restored, and love freely given and returned. The quiet moments, her paw brushing my hand, her nose nudging mine, her head resting on my chest, were the true victories. They told me that she had chosen to believe again, and in that choice, she had gifted me something equally rare, the courage to believe in connection, warmth, and care once more. Every day brought a new small miracle. She discovered the soft rug by the couch and claimed it as hers, dragging my slipper onto it with playful seriousness. She learned to chase the sunlight pooling on the floor, to wrestle gently with Mr. Ramirez's shepherd, and to respond to the call of my voice with excitement rather than fear. I laughed more, smiled more, and felt my heart open in ways I hadn't thought possible. Selena had transformed my apartment, my routines, my life. What began as a desperate act of rescue had grown into a partnership of trust and love. We had saved each other in different ways, she from the streets and neglect, me from isolation and quiet despair. Her presence brought joy into corners I had long abandoned, filling my days with purpose, laughter, and warmth. The final lesson was simple, yet profound. Healing is not a single act. It comes in moments of patience, tiny steps, soft whines, and fragile trust. It comes when a trembling puppy curls into your arms and lets you stay. Selena had taught me that courage could exist even in the smallest, most frightened creatures. That love, when offered freely, could rebuild what fear and abandonment had broken. One night, as I watched her sleep beside me, chest rising and falling in steady rhythm, I realized the truth I had felt but never spoken aloud. She was family. She was proof that hope could survive even the bleakest corners. She had once cried, "Don't touch me," and now, months later, she pressed her head into my chest without fear. She had reclaimed life, joy, and trust, and in doing so, had given me the same gift. Selena, the little puppy who hid in a corner, trembling and broken, had become the heartbeat of my home. Her story was more than survival, it was transformation. A reminder that one act of kindness, one rescue, can change the course of a life. And every time I see her curled up by the window, I remember love, patience, and trust can rebuild what fear and neglect once tore apart. And in that quiet certainty, I knew we would never be alone again.